So all the stab stitching's been done and all the rings are sewn on by hand, and what I'm going to do now is just press down, give it a press on those sides that I hand sewed. Make sure that's all nice and crisp. The hem we sewed. Take out any pins if there's still any in there. And then I'm going to turn it over to the right side. This is where I'm going to do my final measurement for the length of the blind. So the length of my blind is 113 finished. So what I'm going to do is take my tape measure and measure from the base to 113, put a pin line in all the way across at intervals of about 20 centimetres or so. Make sure you're very precise about this because you want it to be exactly that long. And I'm back to using the larger glass-headed pins because this is going to be the top of the blind, so it doesn't matter if there's any puncture marks in this. This is going to be on the very top where any light goes through. Okay, so on the back there I had some pins holding the lining in place, so I could take those out now because I've gone through all the layers with those other pins. I'm going to get my velcro. Now if you get velcro with your cassette that you buy, then it will be stuck to the top of the cassette and you just peel it off. Otherwise you can buy it by the metre. If you're not going to use a cassette head rail, you can use a batten, a wooden batten. Then you have to buy your own velcro. So you want the soft side is sew on and the rough side is going to be self-adhesive. You're also going to staple it onto your batten, but you want it to stick as well. But if you buy a cassette head rail, the rough side will be part of the head rail and then you get the soft side attached to it. Now the first thing to do is measure the piece of velcro to be the width of your blind. And the width of our blind is 129 centimetres. So I'm going to do that first. I'll put a pin in and then I'm just going to double check that before I cut it. Just measure it again, make sure I've got that exact. Yeah, that's right. And the reason that we cut the velcro first is because it's very easy to end up with the blind not being quite 129 at the top. So by cutting the velcro first, you're going to make the blind fit this piece of velcro. You're not just gonna, because sometimes if you just push velcro along, you can actually stretch it and it will end up that you brought your blind in a little bit. So where that pin line is, I'm going to position the velcro above it and I'm going to position it probably about a couple of millimetres above the pin line. Now I'm going to pin the end first and I'm going to put a vertical pin in. So I'm leaving those pins in that's marking the top of my blind, and I suppose it's literally about 2 mils or 3 mils above I've positioned the Velcro. Now I'm going to go to the other end now and position that in, because I know this Velcro measures 129, so I want it to fit. So I'm going to make sure it's right on the end, just a couple of mils above the pin, and pin that line in. And you can see it's quite loose, so if I just fed that along, I'd end up making the blind smaller than 129. Now I'm just going to stretch that on to make sure it fits all the time, just positioning it a little bit above that pin line. It's best to put sort of horizontal pins in like this as you go along. Best to work on the table for this because it's quite hard. You're going through all the layers, which is actually 1, 2, 3. Velcro, the interlining, and the fabric itself. And the reason that I'm putting pins this way is so that I can leave them in as I machine, or at least pull them out just before I get to them. They're not going to be in the way. I'm really going to put quite a few in just to hold it in place so it doesn't move while I machine it on. So that fits well now. And I'm going to go to the machine, and I'm just going to machine quite close to the edge. I'm going to try and leave these pins in, these marker pins for the top of my blind, just pushing them to one side as I machine, because that is where I want to fold it for the top of the blind, so I don't want to lose those pins. So we'll go across to the machine now. We'll machine this on, and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so we're going to start. This is my pin line that is marking the top of my blind, and I've got my horizontal pins in holding the Velcro. So I'm going to do this lower edge first. Just going to position the needle where I need it. Do be aware that you might need a slightly heavier needle now than a standard 12 or 17. You might need a 14 or a 16 because it's getting quite thick. It depends on the thickness of your fabric. Now you should be able to machine over those vertical pins, but I want to try and keep this pin from coming out, so I'm just going to hold it out of the way when I get to it. But there's the head of that pin. I'm just going to push it out of the way, but leave it in so that I know where to fold that fabric over at the top. The next one. There's the next pin that's marking the top of the blind, so I'm just going to push it out of the way with my finger to get past it. If you find that the Velcro's bobbling a bit, just stretch your fabric out, give it a pull from both sides and let the machine feed it through. So I'm not pulling or pushing it, I'm just stretching out as it's going through, and that'll just get rid of any little bobbles that's starting to come with shunting or such like. So here's the next marker pin, so I'm just going to just push that out of the way. Way to the end, and I'm just going to put my needle down, turn, I'm just going to reverse up, sometimes I find that easier, and then just cut my threads, because I'm going to machine across in the same direction. It's nearly always better to do that than to turn around and go in the opposite direction. Sometimes it will make it shunt. I really don't want it. So I'm starting at the corner here and going along the edge first, and then turning to go along the top. It should be easier now because we don't have any of those things to worry about. Now I can take all those vertical pins out, leaving those horizontal ones, which are marking the fold of the top of the blind. Okay, and now we're going to go back to the table and trim away some of the excess fabric. I've got the blind on the table. This is the top of the blind, and you can see I'm on the wrong side, and this is where the Velcro's been sewn on. So now we're going to trim away the lining flush to the stitch line all the way along. You should be able to just run your scissors along there and cut that all off. And then you're going to go inside and cut away the interlining too. So pull away the fabric to reveal the interlining. You might need to cut some of your block stitching there, and just cut that interlining away as well, just to get rid of the bulk at the head of the blind. So all you'll have left is fabric to actually fold underneath. Just peel that away to get into the corner there to cut away the interface. And then you've got just about 10 centimetres of actual fabric. I'm going to turn it round this way now. So now this is where you use that pin line that you've left in. Can you see these pins? That is the top of the blind. So we're going to leave enough to turn under. We're going to cut most of this away to leave just enough to go under the Velcro, which I would think is about 2 or 3 centimetres. Maybe about 3, I think. I always cut this corner off as well, just get rid of that inside. Okay, like that. And then you're going to use that pin line, fold this under, and then use that pin line to get right to the top of the blind. And you'll have a bit of a turn under here, and that's where you're going to pin it. You can see that pin is marking the top of the blind, so I'm just going to get my pin in through the layers there. all the way along. If you find you've left a bit too much, you just trim a bit more away. Won't do any harm. Better to not have too much in there to turn under. It's getting in the way. And then really you're just going to slip stitch that in place along here and closing up the ends. Just tuck those ends in and get them nice and flush, and just over sew that, slip stitch all the way along. And then that will be ready to, well, if you've bought a cassette head rail, it's ready to put against the head rail and use the strings that are in the head rail to string. But we do need to put the rods and the bottom bar in. That's the final thing that we do. So my next job would be to cut the rods and bars, and you need to measure the rod pockets that you need the rods to go in now, and just make the rods maybe a centimetre or half a centimetre shorter, so they're definitely not going to show. Put them in and I'll show you how to over sew the ends. And again, the rod bar at the bottom, measure the hem and just take off a centimetre for a little bit of movement, and then cut your bottom bar to that measurement. You can actually buy kits where you get the bars and rods all pre-cut for you, which makes it a lot easier. So now we're ready to put the rods and bars in. Now you can either buy these in a kit with your chain head rail that you can buy, or if you're using just a piece of batten for the heading with strings, you can buy these fibreglass rods and aluminium weighted bars separately. The bars come in 4 metre lengths. Oh no, sorry, 3 metre lengths, and you just cut them with a junior hacksaw to the length that you want. And the fibreglass rods come in 4 metre lengths, and again you can just easily cut them with a junior hacksaw. And you can buy little rubber ends to put on the ends if you want to protect the fabric, but generally speaking, if the fabric's quite thick, it'll be fine. So we're just going to slot these in to the open end of the blind channel. So this is going to slot into the bottom, and then each rod I'm going to slide in to the rod pockets. Make sure you cut the rods just a little bit shorter than the pockets, maybe a centimetre shorter or half a centimetre shorter, and then they'll easily fit in. So they won't necessarily be the width of your blind. And then all we've got to do is sew up the ends. And really that's just an over sew, and it's another opportunity to just strengthen these points where the blind will be pulling up and there's the most stress. I'm just going to get some strong thread again, and for the pockets I'm just going to slide in and come up at the base of the rod pocket, let my cotton disappear into the lining, and then I'm just going to do a couple of small stitches just to fasten on. It's quite strong. Then I'm going to hold the pocket vertically and just over sew that end with tiny stitches. You want them quite close together because you don't want the rod to poke out from a hole, and the rods are quite fine and thin, so over sew it quite a few times all the way to the top. And then when you fasten off at the top, just do a couple of stitches in the same place. It's got caught. And then just slide your needle from that point through the channel, and then just cut the thread off close to the lining, and then that's all nicely bound. And then we're just going to do the same to this. Just going to go around the other side. I'm just going to come onto that corner and fasten on. And just let the cotton disappear into your thicknesses of layers. And then just do 2 or 3 stitches in the same place to fasten on. And then you're going to slide down that side, going from one side to the other. So slide through the material on one side, go directly above, slide through the channel on the other side, and you're drawing those 2 edges together. So you won't see any of the stitching. It will just be pulled together nice and neatly. Almost like the action of a seam really when you sew with a sewing machine. It's just drawing the 2 edges together. And again, when you get to the top, do a couple of stitches to fasten off, and then just take your needle through the layers somewhere. I'm just going to fasten off here. Just do a couple of stitches in the same place. And then I'll slide my needle through. Just cut it off. And so that's now closed up nicely. We'll do that to all the rod pockets, and then we'll be ready to do the stringing of the blind. If you've got a cassette heading, cassette head rail, or if not, then you'll be covering a batten, a wooden batten, and putting the velcro on and the screw eyes to carry the cords, and I'll show you how to do that separately.